Hello and welcome to the All Round Coaching Podcast, episode 21. Now, I was going to wait for Mel and do this podcast with Mel, but I've decided I'm going to do it while she's in work, and it's probably a topic that's a little bit more personal to me, and obviously some people might know about it, some might not. And I think approaching the date that it was weird that I just felt like I needed to get this out there. This podcast, I'm going to cover alcohol and me. Obviously, I do coaching and people think the alcohol side is just a health perspective. It isn't, though it does impact your health massively. So I want to go over a podcast as to why my views are the way they are and why I don't nag people with it, but it's probably why I'm so passionate about the effects of alcohol and what it does. Now, small disclaimer on this podcast before I do go into it. This is just my personal experience. Obviously, there is some facts behind it, but I don't want anyone to take this as gospel or take me as judging them, anything like that. So, a small disclaimer, anything here is just my opinion, my personal experiences, and then obviously some health facts in there that are actually in line with what alcohol is and what it does. So I will start at the beginning from when I was, I know I'm only still a small human anyway, but when I was younger. I'll take it back to day one, and obviously I'll build a story around this, and hopefully people maybe resonate with it a little bit, understand maybe why I'm the way I am, my views on alcohol, and obviously why I probably want to help people more now, so more than ever. So without further ado, I will go into this. Obviously for me growing up, when I was younger, my granddad had an off licence, which my dad worked in. Now, if you work in an off licence, you're surrounded by alcohol and it is pretty much on tap. So when you're little, you don't really notice it. If you like your mum and dad has a drink at night, your dad cracks open a beer or they've come home after work. But it's, as I was obviously getting older and then growing up, probably around not the most, I don't want to say not the most happy environment because it wasn't all doom and gloom, but it was quite difficult to grow up with an alcoholic. You didn't know what kind of mood they'd be in, and I think when you were little I think this is why now I'm not the most like vocal person at times, and I do keep quiet. It's only like more of late, like post therapy, that I'd probably speak up a little bit more, but I'd just conditioned myself to be quiet, not make noise, not bother anyone, because then it wouldn't trigger your dad. Obviously if he's had a few bevs, it doesn't trigger anything for him to go off on one. So obviously growing up with an alcoholic, you'd be surrounded by, the shouting, a little bit of domestic violence, and it wasn't a normal environment. And I think for me, it wasn't just occasions that alcohol was associated with. It'd be more Christmas night was always the worst time because it was more normal to see someone drink in excess. So obviously my dad would see that as in he'd get away with it drinking so much and nobody had noticed because it was like the holiday season. So for me, I never really enjoyed Christmas that much because it was always 10 times worse. You'd have the family round, alcohol would be involved, and then things would just kick off. So that would always tarnish Christmas for me, and then I was just never really that bothered about it. It would sometimes get to the point where the police would have to be called, and then obviously my dad would move out, and then we'd come back and it'd be back and forth, and it wasn't growing up in the most stable environment, living with an alcoholic, but seeing the effects of it, I'd start and see which types of alcohol made him worse, and it was always like the spirits, like they were absolutely horrific with his mood. And obviously the older that I got, I think not the more pissed off I got with him, but it was just difficult watching someone destroy themselves, and they're not the normal person when they're drinking. It just isn't them, and I just found it really difficult. Like when he was sober, I'd say he was my dad. He'd take me to football, and he'd always support that, and he'd be proud of like how strong I was, and I think he'd be proud of what I was doing now. But obviously growing up, the more he drank, I was just losing that person, and then it got to a point where he was just always drunk. I'd always say to him, like, you choose alcohol over me, and like even going to pour it out, he'd go absolutely mental. So it was a difficult environment to grow up in, and then it was difficult to then decide, do you just cut all ties with your dad because of his addiction? And I know for me, I'd never abandoned someone in a situation, but I couldn't relate to him. Like, I'd just lost him to alcohol anyway. He was not the same person, to the point where I'd stopped calling him dad. And I know that probably didn't help matters, and it was maybe more to hurt him, and I think it did. But knowing what I know now, and obviously the relationship I had, I know that I couldn't have changed him, and nothing did change him. Approaching, obviously, his birthday is the 15th of September, and he died a few days after his birthday anyway. And I think that's why subconsciously I've just feel the need to get this out there, because I think people think I'm a little bit of a killjoy. If I don't go out drinking, or if I say, like, I am not one to sit in the house and drink each night. I'm not one that'll go home after a stressful day, have a drink, or I'm not one to binge drink on a weekend. Like, I have absolutely gone out drinking, I have drank, and I still do drink, but the effects for me, obviously growing up with my dad, and how much it destroyed our lives, family, him, which I'll go into in a second, but growing up with that, it just put me off. I thought, for one, obviously addiction can be hereditary, it can be genetic, as can mental health. I did not want to go down that same route. So I avoided alcohol. Like, there'd be the odd time I'd drink like a WKD when I was younger, but I wasn't going out on the park with my friends. Like, I can never relate when people say that. I wasn't one going in the woods drinking with my friends. I think there was like once or twice that I drank when I was younger, got a little bit tipsy, but I didn't drink in excess. It just absolutely walloped me because I was so small, and I wasn't used to drinking. I think I only started really drinking and going out when I was 19, going on 20. This has been to the point where I was probably going out regularly on weekends, and I felt horrific for it. Obviously, little did I know about mental health back then. I didn't know why I'd always feel so shit. Alcohol, we know it's a depressant anyway, but I'd feel shit for days and days after. But I still continued this, and I didn't know why. I think, obviously, I wasn't really speaking to my dad at this point. I'd see him now and again if he came up to see my mum, or if he came up to see my sister, but I'd kind of just drifted apart. If I think someone isn't going to add to my life, then I generally don't keep them in it, and I just struggled to connect with him on any level as a daughter and see him as a dad anymore, because he just wasn't that person. Obviously, when I was 18, 19, 20, he was drinking every single day from the minute he got up to it. Sometimes he wouldn't go to bed, but he'd go to bed, and then he'd just drink continuously. How he afforded it, I do not know, because it is not a cheap addiction to have. But I appreciate with addiction, it comes with it's not as easy just to say, oh, stop drinking. I did try and go to rehab, and I think this was on 2 or 3 occasions. Like, he'd stopped drinking for a little bit, but then the environment that he was in, like the friends he was around, didn't support that. So they'd say, oh, 1 drink won't harm you, it'll be fine. And then he's around people that are drinking. So imagine how hard it is to stay off the alcohol when you've done months in rehab, and then you're around people that don't support that anyway. That's why I'm a big advocate on your environment does play a huge role. So he did go back on it, and obviously I think the final time that he did go back on it was the worst. Like, his health was declining. Obviously his skin colour changes. His body couldn't keep up with the demand. Like, he was someone that was 1 point obese. Like, he didn't look after his health, and he was obese because of the alcohol that he drank, and obviously the nutrition didn't match that. His lifestyle was probably absolutely horrific if you're comparing it to mine, but he had the gastric band to then lose weight, and he did stop drinking at that point, and it was just that he was with a friend that did drink, and obviously she got him back on it. But it is quite difficult to talk about this, to be fair, because obviously I'm opening up a can of worms, that chest that has been locked for absolutely years. But his body it couldn't keep up with the demand that he was drinking. Obviously he was becoming a smaller person, but drinking in excess for a larger person. Obviously at 1 point he was over 25 stone, if not close to 30 stone, which is quite big. And I think he was only like 5'9", if that. But he had the gastric band, so his body just couldn't keep up with that. he didn't change any of his habits or lifestyle to actually help with the gastric band and support a healthy lifestyle going forward. He just continued drinking and obviously eventually drinking himself to death. And I think the eye-opener for me, obviously I did go and see him before he did die. He looked so emaciated, like his skin was yellow, and I just don't think I'd ever seen anyone as gaunt and as thin as what I saw him. I hadn't seen him for, God, I think it was a few months, but because I'd not seen him in so long, it just took my breath away. And then I think if anybody knows me, I'm not a person that just cries or breaks down into tears, but looking at him, I just had to, in the hospital, looking at him, I just had to walk back out of the room. It blew me away to see someone, I don't know, just waste away and transform so much. And I think that's the thing with, obviously, when you've drank yourself to that point, it's like we knew he was dying, there was nothing left of him, like his soul was just disappearing. Obviously he recognised me when he saw me, but he wasn't with it. And obviously on his deathbed, I think the realisation hit him where he thought that it was obviously, it's too late for him now, and he even said, like, I'm a stupid man, like, I don't want to die. Like, he wasn't, I don't think anyone's ready to die, to be fair, but he wasn't ready to die. And I think, I knew he always wanted to marry my mum, but he just met someone, married her. Obviously he got wheeled out of the hospital to do that on the day, and then taken back in. I wasn't there for that because it wasn't really something I supported, but that was something he'd always wanted. But obviously my mum, I appreciate my mum couldn't marry him because it wasn't the person that obviously she fell in love with. Like, we all lost him to alcohol anyway. But I know he regrets massively, probably drinking so much, and then not being that father figure, not being that partner to someone, and just destroying his life with it. So I think that's why, for me, I'm so passionate on telling people now, like, the effects of it. And I can see when someone's either a functioning alcoholic, like they're relying on it a little bit, or they're using it as a coping mechanism. And I think, obviously, my personal experience isn't anyone else's responsibility, but maybe it is a little bit of a trigger for me because I've seen what it does. And I don't think that's an image that'll ever leave me. Like, I think my biggest regret is I didn't get to really make amends with him. Because I know, obviously, the man that was in a hospital bed just wasn't there mentally. So I didn't get to then make them amends. I had to just do it at the chapel arrest. And I think that's the biggest thing. Like, you don't want to destroy your life, and then obviously what you leave behind, they have to then fix that and carry that forward with them. So I think just being a little bit more conscious and aware of what's around you, what you've got, and then if someone is trying to help you, then taking that on board as well. So alcohol wasn't, like, it took my dad, and then obviously it then took my uncle, and there were probably similar situations. Like, my uncle had the gastric band, and then he eventually drank himself to death as well. So I think it's really hard for me when people say I'm boring if I don't drink or live a little, or I had it for years when I was growing up. Like, it was weird that I didn't drink and I was teetotal, and people did say, oh, it's not normal and I live under a rock and whatever. I had that growing up, and then obviously going into adulthood now, I do drink, but I can't be one of them people that would just drink aimlessly on a weekend. For me, it's like, it's nice to do an occasion, or it's nice every once in a while for me to have a little blowout. But it affected my life massively, and I know it has gone into from childhood to adulthood. I still find it extremely difficult to talk about. Obviously, I won't go into every little nitty gritty, but if somebody isn't drinking, it doesn't need to be questioned. Don't make that person feel weird for not drinking, because you don't know why they're not drinking. They could be a recovering alcoholic. They could have had trauma similar to me when I was growing up with an alcoholic. So don't make it not normal if someone isn't drinking. It's their decision. Now, I know it is, quote, normal for people to drink now. People drink in the week, they drink after work, they drink it on the weekends. Obviously, they drink in excess on weekends. But I think it is worth knowing the health risks and the impacts of drinking, because I know a lot of people use it and think that it's okay to have 1 or 2 drinks as a relaxant or as a coping mechanism, or if they have a bottle of wine 2-3 nights a week, it's fine. We know that alcohol does affect the central nervous system. It is a depressant. So obviously when we do drink it, it slows down the brain activity, and this is when it leads to impaired judgment, your coordination goes, your reaction time goes, and obviously it does, though it does give you that feeling of relaxation, it is just a plaster. It isn't the fact that it's relaxing you, it is just numbing your brain effectively. And obviously when you have drank, people have that false sense of, because my dad used to drink drive, and it was, he always said I was a better driver. So, and you're actually not, it's just that your judgment's impaired, and obviously your inhibitions are then lower. So when your inhibitions are lower, you're obviously a little bit more outgoing, you're more sociable. And I think the sociable aspect for me when I drank, I was a little bit more chatty with people. That's because I spent so long being probably so reserved and quiet. So I found some social occasions really tough, especially the times that I didn't drink. So I do appreciate now when people drink, it is probably to help them be a little bit more sociable, but I wouldn't go out my way now. I just surround myself with people that I genuinely get on with, and the good people to be around. I wouldn't mix my environment with people that I'd struggle with, or if it was excessive drinking all the time. I can't do that. I think for me it's just better to do it on occasions. Obviously, if people have got their goals in mind, you've got your physical effects of alcohol, like it will damage your liver. We've already talked about your central nervous system, your cardiovascular system, so obviously your blood pressure, your heart health, all that is affected. Especially obviously if we start, it isn't just excessive drinking, it is drinking, say if people have 2 or 3 a week, and then continuing that, so obviously you're still keeping the alcohol within your system anyway. Your immune's weakened, and obviously your mental health as well. There is so many effects of alcohol, which I don't want to go in massively over this, but for me the effects that it has on your brain was the biggest one, because when people are drinking, it takes 2 to 3 months for them brain cells to fully repair. Now, if you continue drinking, then brain cells won't repair. And I think it was a Huberman podcast that I listened to, and this opened my eyes to it, because there was the odd occasion I'd just be having like a Prosecco and that, having a laugh with my friend, and I just thought, wow, if I continued like that, then I would then be obviously impairing my own brain cells. And I always make fun of it and saying there's only one lonely brain cell up there anyway. But it didn't make sense for me, especially running my own business and probably needing to think a little bit more. I can't justify having a drink at night or drinking in excess on weekends. So if we look at the alcohol side, say if you're dieting or you're trying to build muscle, you're trying to look after your health, the nutritional value of alcohol is absolutely zero. The calories are quite high, so obviously 7 calories per gram. Now, these rack up extremely quickly. I think I added up on MyFitnessPal once what one client did consume in one weekend, over a Saturday and a Sunday, and it was 10,000 calories. Now, that's some people, that is their weekly total, but this person didn't know why they weren't getting anywhere. So if you are drinking, even though it is liquid, I don't think people take this into consideration. Obviously, you are drinking empty calories because it offers absolutely no nutritional benefits. It's just that it has got calories in there, and obviously there is alcohols that are lower calories, which I have put on my Instagram before. But if you're trying to lose body fat, then alcohol is going to hinder this a little bit. Not to say you can never drink again and you have to go teetotal, but if your concern is how am I going to fit alcohol in, then it's probably time to rethink your goals and what's important to you. Because if your health is important, and you might be someone that is overweight, or you might be someone that needs to build a little bit of muscle, if your health is important and you're thinking more longevity to be there for your family, then I think you do need to maybe look at the alcohol side of things, because I know this is one thing that people may not look at. It's probably overlooked because it is so normal to drink now. I find it bizarre that people will be sat in a pub on a Tuesday or Wednesday drinking, But I know that is normal, and I think for me growing up, because I always saw my dad drink, and I think I just associate it with that. I just, in my head, and it isn't a judgment on absolutely anyone, but in my head, like, what are people covering up? Like, are we all that pissed off with life that we have to mask it with alcohol? But that's just probably me thinking into that a little bit more. I wanted to get out there what it was like growing up with an alcoholic, and then obviously showing my side of it. Not just the fact that I'm a coach and I'm working in a health and fitness industry, but it impacted my life in such a negative way, and I know it has still impacted me now. Though I'm the happiest I've ever been, it's took me, well, I'm 33 now, it's took me 33 years to get to this point and feel like an actual functioning adult, because there was times I was just absolutely crippled with depression. I didn't want to be here, and I just found life so fucking difficult and shit at times. And I think we all know that our inner child and it stemming from our childhood has a massive effect on that. So any decisions that you make, if you have got a family, I would just always say your kids are a product of your environment, so it's always worth helping bringing them up in a healthy environment. It's not to say that you need to take them to the gym and smash them into the ground, get weights in, but filling like the lives with wholesome nutrition, going on walks, doing family days out. And what obviously me and Mel do, we've started doing activities that are outside of drinking, a little bit more active. And we are on holiday next week. It's not to say we won't drink, but for me, I said I wasn't going to drink until I go away now, because one, I wanted to feel and look better for my holiday, and two, I couldn't justify spending that money and wasting my calories on alcohol when I was trying to achieve them goals. So sometimes you do have to compromise a little bit. It's not about giving up life, but we can't have it all. And if you neglect your health, then don't complain that you're not healthy. You can't expect your body to keep up with the neglect that you're putting it through and the punishment that you're putting it through. We know that processed foods are higher now, and sometimes they are a little bit cheaper, but people are eating more processed foods, they're drinking more alcohol, they're moving less. And then a lot of people do blame genetics, but it isn't actually the genetics, it's your product of your environment. So if you've got a family of overweight people that aren't eating well, then they are going to pass that on to the children. Same as if they're drinking a lot, or same as obviously someone smokes, it's more likely that little kids will pick up them habits as well. And it's just natural because you're in that environment. So that's why I'm probably a little bit more careful now of my environment and where I see my life and what I want it to be like. And I make sure that the people I'm around and the environment that I'm in support that. I wouldn't want to obviously impact anyone's lives negatively. And I think therapy for me has made me a better person now for the people that are around me, because I imagine probably 2 or 3 years ago there was times that I wasn't the best person to be around, because I don't know why I felt the way I did until now. I'd suppressed everything. So yes, I do think that the environment is a huge thing when you're obviously bringing kids up and what you want to achieve out of your health. So we can't, and this, I used to say this as well, we can't blame being big boned, because no one skeletal is big. A skeleton's a skeleton. It's just that our genetics will play a small role, our height, obviously our age and our gender, but nobody, unless they have actually got a diagnosed problem, i.e. with the thyroids or anything, nobody's actually born obese. It is what we're putting into our bodies, how we're brought up, and obviously the access to nutrition. I think especially post-lockdown, all fast food was readily available, and we'd eat in excess because it tastes better. So if you are trying to focus on your health, just a small few changes, like limit your alcohol intake, go for a walk, show your kids obviously the benefit of exercise, eating better, and it makes you feel better, even down to your sleep as well, because alcohol disrupts your sleep massively. People think it relaxes you, but it reduces your sleep quality. So yes, you'd fall asleep, but you don't actually fall into a deep sleep. So that's why you'd probably wake up feeling a little bit more groggier the day after, or throughout the day you end up feeling a little bit more tired. So we know that alcohol isn't actually the best relaxant because it does disrupt your sleep quality. It is putting a plaster on that as well. There is a few things to take away from this. So alcohol, it shrinks your brain. You may put on a little bit of weight during it. Obviously, it's not great for fat loss. You could go over your calories just drinking it. It is a depressant, and obviously it shouldn't be, or hopefully isn't, anyone's go-to if they are trying to sort either the sleep or the mood issues, because it is going to have a negative impact. And obviously I think for me, this has probably been, along with my why, this has probably been quite a difficult episode to record. I don't script anything that I do. I do just speak literally from the heart. So there'll probably be a few instances in this podcast where it sounds like I am going to break down in tears. It's just that it was quite difficult to do. And I think that's why I've decided to actually do it on my own and not do it with Mel. Just so I could probably get everything out there. And I would let her have some input on this. So we'll pause the podcast and then I'm going to bring Mel in just to add to the discussion a little bit, see what insight she has and what she wants to add to it as well. So I will leave this podcast here. The episode will be out next week of part 2, which obviously I bring Mel in and we still continue the discussion around alcohol and me, the effects of alcohol and obviously the impact it had. So come back next week, Monday, when part 2 of the podcast will be out.